Welcome to Your Future Starts Now, the go-to podcast for extraordinary women who are ready to step into their next chapter with authentic confidence. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua, empowerment coach, motivational speaker, children's book author, and girl mom. Whether you're a corporate powerhouse or an entrepreneur, this show is designed for you. Your Future Starts Now is more than just a podcast. It's a movement towards rewriting the rules of success for high-achieving women. Are you ready to get unstuck and step into your next chapter? If so, you're exactly where you need to be. Your future starts now. Welcome to Your Future Starts Now. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua. Thanks for joining us. Today, I am so excited to welcome Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Dr. Cynthia is a national USA Today bestselling author, international speaker, board-certified coach, and distinguished talent and organizational development strategist. With over 3 decades of global executive leadership experience across multiple industries, Dr. Cynthia's expertise centers on her ability to actualize human potential, which is detailed in her nationally bestselling book, Now, Near, Next, a practical guide for mid-career women to move from professional serendipity to intentional advancement. Dr. Cynthia, so happy to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It is so good to be with you, Gia.
I'm so excited to chat with you today. So let's start with Now, Near, Next. Congratulations on your book launch.
Thank you so much.
Very exciting. And it sounds like, this book is going to be very relatable to our listeners. So tell us a little bit about, the book itself and what led you to write the book.
Yes, I'd be happy to. I think the most important thing is the through line of the book is start intentionally working on your future today. So if we were just to wrap it all up, we started out, I was feeling a little restless, a little uncomfy in my role. I was a chief administrative officer, just promoted myself at an organization. And we were going through a CEO change. And, with those change of control, sometimes things get a little wonky. And so embarked on writing this book that I had thought about a long time. When we started really doing the research, we were talking to women like ourselves, professional women who had raised or were raising families, and tried to really unpack what is going on in their respective worlds. And across 900 collective years of experience, 5 race ethnicities, 4 countries, and a 20-year age span, globally, women were saying they were not as intentional. They felt stuck or stagnant at some point in their career. And we identified that the causes that they just felt unactualized. They had more talent to give, more gifts to bring forward, more value to add. And so that really was what led us to writing the book Now, Near, Next, and really helping women think about how can you be more intentional about focusing on your future.
I love that. So relatable, because the women I work with, I see, similarly, they, get into this routine of doing and going.
Right.
And they get stuck in that cycle of going and doing, right? And then it's sort of at what cost?
That's exactly right.
And what are we working towards? And so it does take sometimes those aha moments for you to realize, like, well, what am I doing here? And why am I doing it? Right. And to step back and be intentional. But that can be really scary for women, because if what we've been doing has made us successful, to step back from that is crippling for some people. Right. So I love that you talk about this. And I love the analogy you use. Talk to us a little bit about the carousel analogy.
Yes. It came to me that, so to sort of reflect on something you said, which relates to the getting on the carousel, is that so often women are conditioned to put our heads down, work hard, and good things will happen.
Sure.
So following what you just said is we're so busy in the doing. And that is, okay, we can do that. We can put our head down, work hard, over index on performance, do everything masterfully while taking care of the kids or the significant other or all the aging parents, right? We find someone to care for. And we expect that we'll get tapped when it's our turn because we're doing all the things that we've been conditioned to do, which is to put our head down and work really hard. And so the metaphor is, it's like getting on a carousel. You get on the pony. You pick the white pony and you get on, and everybody else gets on along with you, and you put your head down and you're going in circles and you're doing all the things. And at some point you're feeling a little stuck or stagnant or restless or uncomfy, and you look up and a lot of the riders have changed. You're still stuck on that same pony. And the men, by the way, are racing past us on real horses. And, we like to say it's not an indictment of men. It's really, how do we take a page out of that playbook?
Sure.
How do we look up and look forward and think differently about our careers, still doing the thing that we're doing day to day with excellence, but not putting off our aspirational next?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you touched upon the gender aspect, which I think is really important. So from your perspective, what would you say? I know you talked about some of the societal conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think causes women to hold back, whereas men are able to push past those pain points?
Well, that's a big question, right? That's a huge question. I think there are a lot of things.
Yeah.
I would say that if we were to boil it down to what we found in research, that is the biggest, is that it gets back to, we're so busy pouring into everyone else
Yeah.
that we don't take time to invest in ourselves. And so there's a lack of intentionality. And that's what we heard. I mean, the women we studied were successful, professional,
Mhm.
women that had really done well in their careers. But what they said is right place, right time, serendipity, luck. They attributed so much of their success not to, as I was doing this thing, I was preparing myself and intentionally looking toward the next. And the reality is, we know that by the evidence and the data, how many women are in the C-suite. We look at the equity wage gap, right? So when we look at those things, not everybody's that lucky. Not everybody has that kind of serendipity or, right place, right time. And so I think what largely, aside from societal norms, aside from some of the cultural things that are real, what we can control is, how are we making ourselves a priority, even if it's 7 minutes a day, right? Less than 10, more than 5. How are we making ourselves a priority? Carving back some time that says, my aspirational next is pick a thing, and I'm going to start momentum. I'm going to put energy toward that every day, even if it's just a little bit. I'm not going to put it off until I've made everybody else's world perfect.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I agree. I mean, I think there are a lot of contributing factors, but I do agree that at the core is the societal and cultural conditioning that we are given as girls,
That's right.
to take care of everyone else, to put everyone else's needs first.
Mm-hmm.
And the perhaps unintended consequence of that is we are put on the back burner. And to your point, we're not investing in ourselves and prioritizing ourselves.
That's
And
exactly
so,
right.
right. And again, I think that drives us to succeed in many areas of our life, but then you realize it's no longer serving you, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to kind of shift gears, which is really hard. So you talk about the mid-career in your book. Talk to
Mm-hmm.
us a little bit about what specifically that means, mid-career women.
I appreciate you asking, because we actually discovered that this gets misinterpreted well after the book was published. As we were talking with women or coaching women, I'll tell you what it's not first. It's not middle life. It's not midlife. So it doesn't mean middle age. It's not really age bound,
Mhm.
and it's not status bound. It's not middle management. What it really is, from our research and discovery, it's that 3+ decades of a woman's career post that sort of emerging leader, maybe pre-children, pre-marriage, what have you. So if we were going to put an age band on it, probably starting at 26, 28 years old, but all the way into 60 and growing as women are working longer.
Mm.
And what we know about that time is it's the most complex part of a woman's life. They are the busiest, they're taking care of more people, they're involved in more things. And so because of that, that intentionality that maybe we had coming out of undergrad and moving into our first professional job where we're hungry and we're climbing and we're going and we didn't have the world to take care of, starts to go away. And then suddenly our plates become very, very full. And for 3+ decades, we put our head down, we work hard. And I had somebody say to me recently, I thought this was really interesting, that the social norms that we are formed with in our elementary and high school years. If you think about it, young girls are working hard, they're focusing on their curriculum, they're the first to raise their hand, and they're getting the gold stars, right? The boys are goofy and playing. And I mean, it's a general statement.
Sure.
But what happens is we continue to think that that same behavior of putting our head down and working really hard and being masterful, we're going to still get the gold stars. And the young men have now grown, the young boys have grown into young men, and they're still looking up and looking forward and saying, put me in, coach. And so they're more often promoted based on potential and putting their aspirations into the universe. And we're hoping and expecting somebody is going to see the fruits of our labor and reward us accordingly.
So fascinating. And I can't help but think of, what the women I work with, a lot of times what I see is we're proving ourselves. We're trying to prove ourselves or prove our worth. Right. And what are we proving and who are we trying to prove it to? Whereas the boys are not raised with that same mentality.
That's right.
Right. And so to your point is when you grow up, you're not bound to those same limitations.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so unwinding and changing that mental mindset, as you said earlier, can be difficult because it's so counterintuitive. And I do think limiting and holding us back. The other thing you asked about the barriers or the things, I would say second to lack of intentionality, and it's married to it, is we don't put our aspirations into the universe. Again, we sort of have this expectation that our good work speaks for itself. And so generally speaking, women are shy to put, hey, I'd really be interested if that promotional opportunity comes along, or that lateral move that would widen my point of view comes along, what have you. And then we can be really frustrated or disappointed when we're overlooked for something that, quite frankly, if we're relying on others to read our minds, we're probably going to be disappointed a lot.
Yeah. And that's where the intentionality, I think, is really important, right? Because I think when you are starting out in your career, there's an abundance of opportunity. Usually you are very driven and motivated and trying to get to that next opportunity, that next level. And a lot of times, people will recognize that and tap you on the shoulder for the next project or the next role that comes up. But then as you progress in your career, right, your options become limited.
That's
and
right.
There's more sharp elbows.
That's exactly right.
Right. And so it becomes much more challenging. And then we're just not used to having to advocate for ourselves in that way.
Well, and think about it too. You said something really important that I actually hadn't thought about before. Earlier in your career, you're doing more tactical work.
Right.
There's more evidence of, that you produced X number of widgets.
Right.
It's easier to define and to measure.
Absolutely.
As you move up in leadership roles, as we all know, that becomes, the metrics get different and they're not as easily quantifiable necessarily. And so that's where bringing forward how your team has performed, how your team has completed certain results. I think women struggle with self-advocating because it feels like self-promoting.
Yes, for sure. And then they will want to be labeled or stereotyped.
That's
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And because they've seen it happen.
Absolutely. And probably, if we were all being honest, done it a few times.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. Great point.
It's hard not to be competitive when you feel that you're living in a scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
Instead of an abundance mentality. And that's the other thing I think, age has I think afforded me is to think differently about how important it is to pour into other women and support women. And there's plenty to go around. And so how do we shine a light for one another rather than sharp elbows and assuming that it's a scarcity?
Yeah, completely. The power of the network and mentorship and sponsorship is
Mm,
so powerful, in finding people who are going to be your advocates and who you can learn from, and how we can lift each other up. So I agree that's critical for women in leadership.
mhm. Absolutely.
I'm curious, I read an article, not to put you on the spot. I read an article just the other day about, and this isn't really necessarily a new concept, but how women, and it's not necessarily just in America, but I think it has a global impact, are choosing to have fewer or no children.
Mhm,
And so we've seen sort of the evolution of women are having children later in life,
mhm,
right? Then it was sort of women are having fewer children. Now the theme seems to be women are not having children. And for some, it might just be they make an intentional choice. I don't want to have children, right? For some, it may be they can't have children. But there's a segment of the population who is affirming that the reason they are not having children is because of the resource constraints and
mm,
the economy,
mhm,
which is
mhm.
scary to think
Yeah,
about,
it is. It's
right?
terrible. Yeah,
Because
it really is.
we've sort of pushed this myth for years, and again with good intentions, we can do it all, we can have it all, and it's not actually true. And
Mhm,
so, and so dispelling that myth and shifting that message, I think, is important. But I think more and more people are realizing, like, I'm not going to be set up for success.
right, right.
So I would love your take on, just women in general who, are balancing and juggling being a high achieving woman and career driven and parenthood, having a
It's
family.
so much. It's so much. And I'm even seeing that in the circles of with my
Mm,
own adult children, and my niece and nephews, where they're really thinking hard and fast
mhm.
about parenthood
Yeah.
and when and how and if.
Yeah.
Um, so absolutely, I think that here's two things. One of the things I would say is I think it's possible for women to have it all if and when society catches up with the realities of making the workplace not suited for white men whose wives stay at home and raise the children.
Yeah.
And that is the structure that has been built.
Yeah.
And it pains me when I look at data like Gartner data that is very clear that the pandemic taught us a lot,
Mhm.
that is very clear that people with portable work can work highly productively from home and be very successful, in some cases more successful.
Yeah.
And it's very clear in the data. What's also clear in the data that is disappointing is that managers and leaders are still lagging in their belief that the people that they would be most likely to promote are those that they see in the hallways every day and show up in the office. Because there's still this old mentality that what's not in front of me, what I can't walk down the hall and see, is somehow not happening.
Yeah.
And I deal with a lot of clients on a regular basis, mostly men who feel very strongly that they just have not adopted this flexibility, and
Right.
so that's going to continue to be limiting. And I think it puts at risk all of the work we've done around gender and diversity equity, because we know that the BIPOC community and women more likely prefer to work from home. The data shows that they have a higher preference of working from home than our white male partners. And if society's still lagging about who they're promoting and who they're seeing and who they're acknowledging based on showing up in the office, I fear that is going to send us backwards. The notion about the listening audience, and I was one of them for many years as a single mom for a portion of that time,
Mhm.
is what I really try to inspire with the women that I work with, and what we bring forward in the book is it starts with boundaries. And you alluded to this in the beginning of we're trying to do it all. We want to do it all. And first of all, no is a complete sentence. And, I love that statement. But the other thing is, we tend to try to put everything in the box of it's important to the external world, and therefore it must be important to me. And so everything gets put in this high priority category. And what we try to provide is this quadrant that, if you think about the y-axis or the vertical being, it fills my cup, it's intrinsically satisfaction, I like doing it, etc. And the x-axis as being, I perceive it has high external value.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to the kids' school, it's important to my church, it's important to my community, pick a thing. Again, we put everything in this top right box as though it's all of the things. What I really try to help women think about when they're in that complex part of their life is, if it has high perceived external value, but it doesn't play to your strength, you don't like doing it, it doesn't fill your cup, whatever, right? Find a way to outsource that.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, no, I'm not available to let your dog out every day at 5 o'clock and feed them while you're on vacation. But, Susie across the street has a teenage boy or girl. They might be willing, or my teenage person might be willing. I was not good at volunteering in my kids' schools. Little people in those environments, I just realized, not my gift. But you know what? I can pen a check for $10 or $15 so they can get Kleenex and markers and, school supplies and things. So how do you outsource? And then don't let go of the things that give you joy, even if they don't have high perceived external value. And so I think it's being more discerning about where and how we're spending our time, instead of thinking that we have to wear this cape and do everything. Like sometimes the woman who has chosen to stay home, which I think my daughter has done, my sister did for a number of years, and I admire that.
Sure.
Busy job, but maybe they have the cuter cupcakes than you do. That's okay.
I love that. It's so true. And I think that's where comparison comes into, right?
Right.
This one's working, that one's not working. This one made homemade brownies for the bake sale.
Yes.
And I bought cookies from the supermarket.
Right.
Right. And I think we try to compare ourselves and live up to a standard that may not be our standard.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And may not be even realistic of those we think we're comparing ourselves to.
Sure. Apples to oranges, right?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about in the book, I thought my mom was literally a superhero. Like she demonstrated that you could work and raise kids and do it all. But in talking to her later, the struggles and the difficulties and the sacrifice. I think my daughter and I have had the same conversation, right? So she's chosen to be a stay-at-home mom. She's amazing. She has 1,000 side hustles, but she has this deep feeling of need that she doesn't want any of my help because she has to prove that she can do it all. And, talking about, honey, it was not easy.
No.
Like lots of failures, but you make choices.
And again, I think that's a very common theme of, I have to do it on my own. I have to do it all myself. And the one thing we didn't talk about is the never let them see me sweat.
Right.
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 If you're going to cry, you go in the bathroom and you cry where nobody is.
That's exactly right.
Hear you. And so it does take a lot of intentional work to shift those beliefs and that dynamic. And I think about, one of the things I like to think about, in those moments is, how do I shift it, not just for myself, but for the next generation?
Absolutely.
Right. For my kids, what am I teaching them by holding in the tears, by hiding in the bathroom? Right. Versus, no, you know what? I'm telling you, it's okay to cry. And therefore I have to be okay with letting you see me cry.
Absolutely. I had a mentor say to me years ago, she said, Cynthia, people have trouble reading you sometimes because you are always you're emotionally controlled. They don't see you angry. They don't see you sad. You're just kind of consistent, and that's great, but almost to the point that they can't read your cues if you're feeling disappointed or frustrated or angry or sad. And there's something about being human that, and giving people some insight into how they can empathize with you, how they can build a deeper relationship with you. And I thought, because I've been conditioned to keep it together.
Yes. So interesting. I can relate to that, right? Of being stoic
Yes,
in meetings, and there are a lot of advantages to it, right?
absolutely.
You know, but at some point, people do want to relate on an emotional level, and
That's right.
so I think it is important to find that balance.
And it's a gift of women. Let's be
Yeah,
honest,
for
right?
sure,
I think it's one of our superpowers
for sure.
is the ability to connect emotionally and at that deeper level. And I think that there's a beautiful difference in people and individuals and uniqueness and
Mhm.
playing to those gifts and strengths instead of trying to subdue everything and fit a particular mold um, is an advantage to all of us.
Absolutely. So speaking of fitting the mold, and just going back
Yeah.
to kind of what we were talking about earlier with respect to the corporate environment and the dynamics that exist today, and I'd love your take on how do we start to shift some of that, right? So when we think about the traditional dynamics, like you said, that, you know, historically driven by men who had
Hmm.
women who were staying at home raising kids, right? That's not the world we live in. Um, how do we start to break down some of those barriers that may still exist for people, whether it's you need to work 9 to 5, whether it's, you know, your butt needs to be in a chair in the office, whether it's, you know, just leadership style of the hierarchical top down
Hmm.
approach. How do we start to break down some of those barriers as women?
I think it's several things. One is I think it's open communication and dialogue. I think,
Mhm.
having a conversation. Let's assume that you report to a man and you need a certain level of flexibility. You're working just as hard, if not harder, right, than those around you. But having the conversation of here are all of the things that are part of my day. Here's my day in the life, right? These are the things I do before I come to work. These are the things that, are my
Mhm.
responsibilities or I take on as responsibilities. And so, with that in mind, what works really well for me is the following kind of schedule, cadence, et cetera. And I can, ensure you that this is the kind of productivity that you're going to get.
Mhm.
And how does that sound and how does that land on you?
Mhm.
I also think there's times we have to make choices that it's not the right environment for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes we simply have to determine that the expectations and the culture are just not aligned. And that's okay. That means go find something that is a better fit for you. It
Yeah.
has to be the right fit for you. But I do think open dialogue. I think role modeling. You mentioned it earlier. What example am I setting for the next generation? What
Mhm.
example am I setting for other women, even within my same generation
Yeah.
and beyond? So I think the role modeling piece of that is super important. The other thing I'm working on right now is an allyship guide. Is really to try to better seek out those men who are at least curious, right? Those that they just lack the awareness. I'm an optimist. I believe that more men out there would lean in,
Mhm.
would be an ally, would be a champion if we gave them the information.
Sure.
I really think so much of it is lack of awareness, ignorance, right? And discomfort
Yeah, and not
because
knowing
it's a
what to do, right? To your point, they
yeah.
want to help, but they don't know how or what they should be
Right.
doing.
Tell me how. Right. Tell me how. And sometimes women want to go, well, I shouldn't have to tell you
Right.
how. Well, guess what, ladies? You do. Let's just be honest. You do. And so I really want to kind of equip both sides of the equation. I really want to help women to take responsibility for their own agency, have a voice. Don't leave it to the company or the boss or somebody else to be in charge of what happens next in their career and in
Yeah.
their professional pursuit. So that's part one. Part two is recognizing that I'm probably not going to touch every single woman in the world. How can we also equip men to ask the questions, to seek out what the aspirations
Mhm.
are of that talented woman in their office that maybe hasn't spoken up, to seek out their voice and their opinions, to ask them how the environment is working with their um, overall lifestyle and responsibilities. And so I think talking about it, role modeling it, and then educating men.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Such great advice. And, also what I hear you say, which is similar to the work that I do with my clients is, we can become very deferential, right? And instead of being deferential, really thinking about challenging the status quo. We can do it professionally, we can do it diplomatically, right? Respectfully.
That's right.
But how do we start to shift the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about you. I mean, the reality is when you speak up for yourself, you're speaking up for probably many other women.
That's right. And sometimes speaking up for other women to that very point is equally, if not more powerful. So when you see the microaggressions of somebody being stepped on in a meeting, or you see somebody making the decision of two people are up for promotion,
Mm-hmm.
Tom and Sally, and somebody
Mm-hmm.
says, I don't know about Sally, she has small kids.
Mm-hmm.
You stepping up and saying, well, maybe Tom has small kids too. I'm not sure that that's a criteria that we ought to lean into. Or, I'd love to hear more about what you have to say, Tom, but I don't think Susie was finished with her point.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure I heard what she has to say. You can do it respectfully to your point. You can do it diplomatically, but again, it gets back to role modeling the behavior that we want to see and that we want put toward us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Such great information. Cynthia, I could talk to you for hours.
I know.
Before we wrap up, there's such, you've given already a lot of valuable advice, but is there anything else you would like our listeners to consider doing differently or changing after they listen to this episode?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat something I said earlier because I think at the end of the day, it's just my call. It's my passion. It's my calling, which is to start intentionally working on your future today.
Mm-hmm.
Not when the kids go off to kindergarten, not when they graduate college, and it doesn't have to be a massive undertaking. It could be 7 minutes. So what is that next aspirational goal? It doesn't have to be a promotion. It doesn't have to be a job change. It could be a certification. It could be learning a new skill set. It could be starting a podcast. What is that thing? What is your timeline? And start intentionally making baby steps toward that today. It's so liberating when the time comes because you've put energy and momentum toward that.
Yes. Great advice. And we talk a lot about success and redefining success on this podcast. So I would love to know from your perspective, how do you define success for yourself and how has that definition evolved for you over time?
Oh, it's evolved a lot. So I've only been out of the corporate world for a year, just over a year. I think in my corporate life, there's similarities. In my corporate life, what filled my cup and gave me more joy than anything was watching members of my team flourish.
Mhm.
I'm sort of obsessed with talent. I love to see it, nurture it, grow it. Today, I feel like I've really been called to help women, one woman at a time, to live into her agency. And so when I can have a small part of just igniting a little spark in a woman that encourages her to speak up, invest in herself, put her aspirations into the universe, take a risk, that to me is success. That to me is I'm fulfilling what I feel called to do.
Beautiful. So beautifully stated. I love that. And I want to just congratulate you again on your book. So excited for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Likewise. I know it takes a village.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Cynthia, where can our listeners learn more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah. So zealoftheheel.com, and it's heel like the shoe. I know it'll be in your notes, but it's energy toward moving forward. So zealoftheheel.com is our website. And then all the social handles are Zeal of the Heel, and LinkedIn is The Zeal of the Heel.
Perfect. And I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights and expertise.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And of course, you can visit my website, gialacqua.com, reach out on Instagram at gialacqua. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. This is Gia signing off with gratitude for your time and energy. Our mic drops, but the movement continues. Until next time, your next chapter is waiting. Take care.
That concludes another empowering episode of Your Future Starts Now. Before we wrap up, I want to thank this incredible community of high-achieving women. Your energy, resilience, and commitment to growth are the driving force behind what we do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower high-achieving women just like you. And of course, share Your Future Starts Now with the extraordinary women in your life who are also on a journey of healing and empowerment. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts, let us know what topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Stay connected on Instagram at Gia Lacqua. I encourage you to carry the energy of this conversation into your day and keep on supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time, remember, your next chapter is waiting.